Welcome everybody. We can begin. We're already late as usual, which is good. And geez, so happy to see us get together like this. It doesn't happen very often that you get folks from different groups and hopefully not too many different tendencies to come together and discuss our common heritage and our common interest. Really excited today. We have a good program in the afternoon on different cases that we're presenting. It's a lot of research that's been going on. You're all researchers. I recognize that. We're not the only ones that are doing this kind of work, but we are trying to put it all together. One of my ambitions is to put it into an archive that can then be of use to future researchers at the Smithsonian at some point, and an exhibition. But Taíno tiwa tiawa hupiahe for you. As you know, I am Taíno, and I am also, like, we have Taínos who are artists and Taínos who are farmers and Taínos. I'm a scholar, so that's what I do. And I come at it, when I put that hat on, I come at it trying to see the full documentation of what goes on in our world. As Taíno, it's hard. So when you become your artist, when you do your art, you're thinking as an artist. You're using the rules of art to do what you do. Right? We're working also in documentation. Some of you have done this kind of work before. Somebody just asked me a few minutes ago about the Mayan days, which I tend to post up in Facebook every day these days, and the museum actually picked up as well what days it were. And I'm glad to report that this is a woman's cycle. Yesterday was Noh, which is the Women's Intelligence Day in the Mayan calendar, the real calendar that's alive and used in the communities, not anything anybody's invented. Tihash is today. It's a healing day. Tihash is for the healers, for the doctors, for if you're going to have an operation or if you're going to have any kind of medical work. It's a good day to make your prayers. And tomorrow's Kawok. It's the highest Women's Day. It's the day of the midwives and the day of the grandmothers and the day of even not only of the women but of the female in all of us. So that's the thought. And that's not just for the women, but that's the primary day. So we're blessed with some good days, and I'm really hoping to hear from the women today strongly because of that. We, as I just finish up a couple of remarks, and I'd like Jorge as well to say a few words since he's one of the co-organizers. What I'd like to do today, and we are going to go around so everybody can introduce themselves. But knowing this group, I know that's probably going to take up all our time. So as you introduce yourselves, let me give you a little bit of an assignment to see if we can make some cohesion out of our conversation. And that is essentially the past through the present into the future. What brings you to today as a Taíno? What inspires you? What motivates? What grounds you? What was important in that journey for you to come to that realization and go forward with adding your log to the fire, of this. And then that's been going on really in the count that we have from the late 70s, early 80s, a revitalization movement. Things have been dormant, perhaps, and so there's this revitalization that begins to happen. That's almost 2 generations already. From the first discussions and the first associations and disassociations and all of that's gone on. And nothing is ever smooth in the human being, so it's to be expected that people go in different directions and then converge at other times, and that's the way the rivers get made. So if you could be thinking about that, where would you like to see your children, your grandchildren be in a couple of generations in this? What would you like to see our movement be in a couple of generations? So if you think a little bit about that. So we have a project that we're doing out of the Smithsonian, out of the National Museum of the American Indian, which is a very special institution within the Smithsonian and the museums generally, that it really was created with the notion and a strong philosophy of living cultures, of this notion that we were just speaking about this morning, that there's been a historical expectation of extinction, and certainly we know what that's about, of native peoples generally, indigenous peoples, people of the earth, people of cultures that arise out of a place. There's been a real sense that this is in the way to extinction, and so that's a reality that many people have accepted. But from the mid-19th century, mid-20th century, what had just been kind of there but dormant began to become a movement for indigenous people hemispherically, internationally, globally, that said, no, whatever it takes, whatever contradictions we have, whatever things we have adapted, our people's going to survive. So the expectation is of survival. Survivance, I like that term survivance, because survival is a mere act. Survivance perhaps describes the agency, you know, the protagonism for yourself to do it. Survivance is like a philosophy of we're not going away. So our museum was predicated a lot on that consultation around that idea. And it's a new science, that science of survival. The sciences that could deal with collecting, extinction, analysis, interpretation, they've grown very, very strong. But what allows us to really study the forms of survival? How do we survive when we're so mixed up and when we're so scattered as a people? Where do we go? How do we reinstitute that? And that's we're kind of inventing that, because nobody's ever really done it in our context before. But it is being done all over the Americas. You know, we talk easily about the Maya these days, but 40 years ago, the Maya was almost only an archaeological term, anthropological term. The Mayans themselves had not re-adapted that term. They reinvented that term. You know, even the fierce sovereign Mohawks of my wife's people, they were St. Regis Band of Indians until the early 50s, when somebody started to say, no, we're Kanyangahaga, and then what would that make us? We're Mohawk. Well, we're Mohawk. So that rebuilt, and now there isn't a Mohawk kid in the whole of the Six Nations that doesn't know about being a Mohawk, you know. But 40 years ago, St. Regis Band of Mohawk Indians, what the BIA had named them, et cetera, et cetera. We know that story. So that's where we're coming from as we collect things. We want to be truthful in our documentation. We want to make sure we're not doing pretend things, that we're looking for reality, but we want to abarcar, you know. We want to drop it all into the basket. The importance of the Smithsonian for that, and that's the reason I'm still holding on there for the time being, is that it's such a central institution to American knowledge, accepted institution of science, that it's of value to us. It's not for me to have an archive in my house. It's for bring together something that the generations will be able to go to and add to, and have an archive that anybody that's doing work on this kind of topic will have to in some way go through, and at least hear what's going on. So that's why I think these voices, as they emerge, you know, what we've been engaged in is no fad. It's not going away. People expected it to go away. It's not going away. So I think that's the promise that we have for our next generation. If this is going to be real, if there's going to be a way of rebuilding our consciousness, that's where we're coming from. So I wanted to say that much anyway this morning to begin. We have here a representation of someone that was very dear to me, and that's Siku's mother, Marie Helene Lorac. In the activism that our people began to be engaged in throughout the Americas, suddenly I hear of a Taíno woman from Haiti running a newspaper in San Francisco, Indigenous, that was really making a difference. And I was engaged a couple of years later in the work of the Akwesasne Notes, which was the Mohawk newspaper that became the movement's newspaper through the 60s, late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we talked and exchanged things, information for those two publications weekly for, years, 2-3 years. I remember Sandy Davis, the anthropologist Sandy Davis, was very involved with that. He's actually the one that introduced me. So on behalf of everything that effort represents, Siku, I really want to greet you formally, lovingly, for your mother. When we embraced, I felt like I was embracing your mother finally, because I really was very inspired by her, what she was doing at that time. Very few people really had taken on those roles at that time, and she was completely in it, for everybody, not just for herself or her people. So on behalf of our group, I wanted to give you a little gift, and I wanted to pass that to you to thank everyone. You could come up. One is a book called Infinity. It's a book called Infinity of Nations, which represents this exhibit that we have here, which is the Americas. It's all the beautiful things we have from the whole hemisphere, and it represents the best of our collection with themes of leadership and arts and quality. So for that, I want to thank you, give you that. Here I have something that represents the Americas. It's a little pouch made by some very good friends of mine in the Quechua community in the Andes called Chahuaytiri. So there's the south. Mm-hmm. There's copal in here that's grown especially for ceremonies in northern Guatemala in a grove of copal that was planted 60 years ago and has been kept aside only for ceremonial purposes, and those big trees are now cut every year and the sap extracted. That's the copal pom. And there's also some sage from the Black Hills of South Dakota that I use to sundance. So that's south, central, and north. And Taíno, we are. So.
Thank you everyone for coming, especially during this snowstorm. I mean, everything's been going against us, and it wasn't the shutdown, now it's the snow, but at least we're here today. I feel really lucky, because I work here and I get to explore all these things that, like what Jose was talking about, and tengo 20 years here at the museum. But now after 20 years, now it's when things are really coming together as far as our Taíno thing is concerned, and it affords me being able to go into these communities on the island where I come from or other places, and I've learned so much more this year than what I thought I knew. So I think that this is great for all of us, because I think it's really important that we're all on the same page when it comes to this thing. I think a lot of times when we were all in our own separate worlds, everybody, you're doing your thing on one side, but we really should have something centralized so that we all know where we're going with all this.
Hello everybody, as Jose said, my name is Siku, Siku Alalu. I grew up in the far northern part of Canada. My mother was Marie-Hélène Lorac, Taíno from Haiti. And my father is Titus Alalu from Nunavut in northern Canada. He's Inuit Nation. And I won't take too much time, but I just wanted to say that when I was running here, I was so happy because I've been waiting for snow the last 3 months, and I also. I had a really strong sense of my mom when I was running here this morning, and I know she would be so happy to be here. But also, I feel her here too, and I'm very happy to meet you and to meet everybody that's here. I know she would love this. Thank you.
My name is Valerie Nanature Vargas Estevez, and I am Taíno from the island of Boriquen. I have been involved, or at least searching and researching my Taíno heritage most of my life, but mostly in the last 25 years. I think having children really gave me that push to look at who I am and where I come from. My mother would have stories of when she was young and being born in a bohío and having a conuco, and how her father would take his wares and his produce down to the village via burro, but those things all kind of fell off the wayside, as they assimilated, as we had increased relative affluence. Those things started to fade away and become less important in our family. More important was what we had, where we were going, and there was no looking back. There was even kind of a turning of the back to this part of their being, because it was no longer considered an intelligent way to be, a progressive way to be. And seeing that, being involved in that, and then having children, being involved in the Southwest, that I lived there for a while, made me realize that I needed to look at this indigenous heritage that I had. And as a result, I met George via the internet many, many years ago, and we collaborated on, writing and research. And I moved back here to the Northeast, and this is where I became very involved. And it's been an evolution for me. I started out looking at my culture in a different way than I am now. Now I'm more involved in the research and the academic and the cultural aspect of it. My religiosity is my own, and everybody has their own. And I believe that's something sacred within ourselves. But we look at our culture, what's left of it. If I go to Boriquen, it's hard. There's so little left. It's been so assimilated into Western culture, strip mall after Walmart after this and that. And, you really have to go deep in the mountains to find, the continuation of that culture. So I will look for it wherever I can find it, whether it's in Cuba, when I was there over the summer, talking to people about their ideas of their indigenous heritage, whether it's in the Dominican Republic. It's just so massive and so rural and like 20 years behind what Puerto Rico is. You can still find a lot of that living culture in there. So to me, it's about grasping what we can, continuing it, and giving it to our children. I want my children to know, and that's my biggest, driving force, is that my children know who they are, where they come from, so that they can continue on and give it to their children and have that pride in being Taíno. And I have a Lakota son, and he's just as Taíno as he is Lakota. I make sure he has a knowledge of his Lakota heritage, because he is full-blood Lakota, but because he belongs to me, he is also Taíno. So that's all part of what we're trying to do, and trying to educate people around us, because the ignorance is amazing. It's just amazing. Oh, Taínos, what are they? First of all, they don't know who the heck we are. They thought we all died, and you don't look Taíno, you don't look Indian. I'm like, well, why? Because you're not wearing feathers? Or, okay, where's your powdered wig and knickers? I tell them, it's the same thing. We all evolve. We're nurses and doctors, and we're, grocers and bricklayers, and we wear sweats and jeans. It doesn't matter what we look like on the outside, it's what we have on the inside, and that's what we carry in our heart. And for me, that's important, to let people know that we're still here.
Greetings, my name is Peter Mola. I'm a Taíno from Quisqueya. I'm basically pretty much a poet, a writer. I started with this learning from a friend I used to train with in a gym. He got me, into learning about myself, my history and culture. I never really looked into planning like seeing myself where I am now, just sharing, what I've learned. But I see myself in a personal journey. Mainly, I study into the mythology, the spiritual aspect of the culture, and just taking it to learn, and gain understanding of myself, how they saw the world and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what I'm into. I'm into the writing. I write a lot about, what I study. So I feel it's an honor just to learn from everyone here today about, the Taíno culture and to show that, we never faded away.
Hi, my name is Gilbert Sotomayor, and I come from Puerto Rico. And that's it.
That's good. And I am proud to be Taíno. Hi everyone, I'm very humbled and honored to be here. My name is Warichi, that's my Taíno name. My government name is Candida Soto, aka Candy. I don't know why I was invited here, honestly, because I really don't know much in comparison to everyone else that's here. Punto y fino. In researching, I've mainly spoken to everyone that's here. And that's, I don't really believe much in books. I'm sorry to say, but anyone can write a book and say anything. So I basically rely on what our Taíno ancestors rely on, which was the word. And that's mostly where I get my knowledge from someone who says, esto lo hizo mi abuela así, y no, mi bisabuela lo hacía así, y mi tatarabuela o mi tatarabuelo. And so that's what I honor mostly. But I'm, again, very humbled and honored to be among you guys here. And I mean, really, what else can I say? Thank you very much for inviting me. Very glad to be here, guys. I love you all.
Hi, mi nombre es Lizzie Sarovey. I'm from Puerto Rico. Tengo my sister Sylvia in Guaribo. I don't know.
Dilo en español.
Yo he estado en la cultura muchos años. He participado con diferentes grupos culturales en organizaciones. He tenido un grupo de cultura indígena folclórico. Guaquiara, Huacataína, y ahora pues he venido a ver si empezamos el disco se llama Sentimiento, y es importante estar aquí viendo que hay muchos hermanos unidos. Es muy importante seguir llevando la cultura, pero solamente lo más importante es aprender. Cada día se aprende. Yo también estoy de acuerdo con ella, no estoy muy de acuerdo en los libros, pero es algo importante que tenemos que seguir educándonos, aprendiendo, llevando ese sentimiento. Y lo más importante para mí no es ser taíno, sino qué vamos a hacer como pueblo, como taíno. Esa es mi labor aquí. Y mi papel aquí es como llevar el respeto de la mujer como taína, sacar esa mentalidad colonial del pasado y que también las mujeres podamos llevar nuestra voz como taína. Soy taína.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Benitez. My name is Guarishecoa. I don't know if I've always been in this movement, but I guess that's what my mom did when she pushed me out, because I've always been this. I've been confused with being anything other but Taíno. I stood away for a long time, and yet my main focus was to teach my children so they could teach their children, And so that way, when they say my name, it wasn't in vain that I came to this land, this time. I'm very proud of what I have done. I'm sure that there's a lot more I can do. Unfortunately, again, my main thing is my children. And now I have grandchildren, and I'm doing a very good job with those. And so at the time where they take it somewhere else, that'll leave some legacy for me. I was invited here. I'm here with a lot of family, friends. Sagate, hi. He married me and my husband, and so this is my sister for a long time. Many of my brothers, for such a long time, we've grown, we've matured together, let's say it that way. My children send their love because they knew I was going to be here. And I think as a Taíno woman, I'm so proud that my children are proud of who they are. And I know that they will stand up for anything I taught them. Sometimes I say I don't know a lot, and yet when you bring it up, I'm like, I know that stuff. So I guess I am smart about it. But I'm humble about it because I don't mean to keep it to myself. And yet I do pour it out. Don't get me wrong. But I respect it. I live it every day. It's in my blood. It's in everything I do. And so I honor my ancestry so that way my children will honor me. I'll soon be ancestry for my great-great-great-grandchildren. And so at that time, when they see a picture of me, and let's make sure we leave pictures, let's make sure we leave names. And when we sit around like this in another 10 years, I'm like, damn, you're looking old. But it feels good, because you know what? You did what you had to do, you learned what you had to learn, and I may not know exactly like them, or you, we all know different things, but as we come together like this, you're gonna teach me something. And I don't know if I could teach you anything, but I'll teach you that in this society, it's been hard. It's been hard teaching these girls to respect themselves and to teach their children. And guess what? From this morning, I woke up, and believe me, I had a good cry with my daughter. And she asked for forgiveness for all those things that she doesn't know why she did it, because now she has a baby. Please don't go, Mom. Please take that little Taíno warrior with you. And it was so good to hear her say that. Not take this kid with you. Take this little Taíno warrior with you. I said, I did something right. And so I say thank you for having us here. Thank you for everybody that carries on something when I feel like I can't. But I need you to do that for me. Understand that. For me, for my children, for my grandchildren, for your grandchildren, please keep doing it. The little bit I do it with my love and everything, but do it for the children. And if they see that you did it with love and that you meant it and you were proud, believe me, they'll carry it on. Thank you.
Saludo a los que no hablan muy bien inglés, por favor alguien tradúzcale, quiero hablar español. No hablo español muy bien, ni inglés tampoco muy bien. Mi lenguaje no lo sé, okay, porque soy taíno. Hace casi 30 años aproximadamente estuve en Boriquén con mi papá en San Germán, y a los 14 años mi papá me dice a mí, mi bisabuela era india, pero yo lo miraba a él como medio raro porque era un campesino, un jíbaro, un hombre del monte cortando caña y cogiendo café, y yo no le quería hacer caso a él porque, ¿para qué tú me dices esto a mí? Yo tengo 14 años, que yo quiero saber tu abuela. Y la cosa era que él me decía el cuento y me lo repetía. Nosotros somos indios. Mi bisabuela la cogían los pejos. Y yo, pero, ¿qué pejos? Los pejos de los españoles. Entonces, yo no entendía por qué él me quería hablar de esto, pero iba pasando de generación en generación. Hoy en día, si buscamos un libro o una revista, no vamos a ver mucha literatura de los taínos, de nosotros. Pero la historia va pasando de generación en generación de nuestros abuelos, de nuestros padres. Y esa es la historia que nosotros tenemos que conservar. Y por eso yo digo que hace casi 30 años yo tengo que seguir hablando de lo que mi padre a mí me contó a los 14 años. Que a ella la corrían perros, hombres españoles con perros para atraparla. y que ella la llamaban salvaje a ella porque se trepaba en los árboles y se escondía en los montes. Y pasó muchos años que yo no quería entender lo que él me decía. Crecí, hice muchas cosas en la vida, pero ahora que mi padre está bien anciano, yo le hago la misma pregunta. Papi, ¿te recuerdas cuando tú me hablabas en mi niñez de tu bisabuela? Vamos a hablar un poquito más del tema. Y comencé a sacarle a mi padre historia, y así mismo, la misma historia que él me decía, me la seguía repitiendo, de que nosotros somos indios. Él no me repetía a mí o me decía, somos taínos. Tal vez ellos no usaban la palabra taíno en ese tiempo. Cuando yo voy a casa de mi papá, hace poco que fui en mayo, para llegar a casa de mi papá en un vehículo, tienen que subir 15 millas por hora, porque está subiendo jarda arriba, los oídos se te explotan, es bien lejos para ir para allá. Cuando hice la búsqueda en Ancestry.com, preguntándole a mi papá los nombres de mis abuelos, nuestra familia lleva viviendo en ese monte aproximadamente 200 años. Y en 200 años yo me pregunto, ¿cómo se movían si no había tal vez carros, vehículos, había caballos? Y entonces, buscando la familia de nosotros, muchos de ellos tienen el mismo apellido, the same last name. Y lo que pasa aquí es que realmente los primos pues se juntaban y tenían hijos juntos. Entonces yo comienzo a entender que ese grupito de familia que vivía en ese monte, están todos relacionados y la misma sangre. Y había mucha sangre indígena taína en esos tiempos. Por eso que mis tías también, voy a casa de mi tía, me dice lo mismo. Somos indios, somos taínos. Y cuando miro las paredes, veo a mi abuela y a mi tía y todas las facciones que nosotros vemos de un indio, de un taíno. Y esa historia quiero compartirla con ustedes para que ustedes sepan y busquen también quiénes son ustedes, cuáles son sus raíces. Si tú cuidas tus raíces, también vas a poder cuidar tu futuro. Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Guaribo Naboria.
Hello, everybody. My name is Roman Perez. My Taino name is Guaraguarish. I'm from Quisqueya, Taino. Was born there, came to the United States when I was 5 years old. Pretty much raised here in Brooklyn. Come from pretty large families there. My mom, my dad, and many brothers and sisters. It was interesting what you just mentioned about us becoming, the older group, elders, the word mature used, and I remember coming around and meeting a lot of you folks, over 20 years ago, and then what you were saying earlier, Jose, about the leaving some type of legacy or some blueprint, right, for the future generations, and that's, I guess, the responsibility that we have. That's what brought me here today. I want to learn more and understand what everybody's doing. My children understand that they're Taíno. They understand that they have their background. Try to bring to the communities whatever I learn, and don't add to my own, try to make up my own stuff, like you were saying, like the whole Mayan thing, It's really interesting that I remember people would ask me, like, where's the Taíno movement today? And I would say, we're crawling, we're infancy, And I would like to the point where I think we're holding ourselves up on the table, we're gonna begin walking, It does take a long time, and we gotta have patience with it and not walk away from the road and stay here and be part of it, because sometimes we lose some good people and they go off and do different things, and forget about their culture. I choose to walk this red road like carrera, right, tight, and stick to it, and really trying to understand and learn more. Something that a lot of the elders in my family are dying off, right? Crossing over. There's very little left. And when we were young and ignorant, they didn't pick up the information or the teachings, or didn't quite absorb them, So now I'm struggling with that, right? And getting whatever, I can. Come from a family of curanderos, tabaqueros, many generations of tobacco in my family from my mother's side. When we came here in 66, we were the first new generation that came here from my father and my mother's side. They were the first ones that came here. So mostly my family's over there. I have very few cousins here. Large family, you know. Got about over 350 first cousins from my father's side, maybe about 200 and something from my mother's side. So it's a big family, right? But there's only a few of us over here. And I remember when I met George many years ago, you know, one thing that he said is when you go back home and, you know, you're doing your research, don't be looking for people with feathers and don't be looking for all this like dancing going on. So look at the traditions, look at the culture. And that's what, you know, I try to do, you know, my family, the tradiciones, you know, the tobacco, you know, and Andujo, you know, which my grandfather gave me. When I left my country, I was 5 years old. I went back when I was 12 for the first time. And my grandfather gave me una cachimba with tobacco in it. And he said, ahúmate, que va a ver los abuelos. And I didn't understand. I ahumé, I got green. I think I threw up, you know, I got sick, you know, I didn't quite understand that. But then when I had children, I went back, you know. I was like 28 years old with my children. I went back, and he was sitting under the same tree, maybe the same pipe, I don't know, but a pipe, and telling me the same thing. And so, you know, that's what I try to like learn. I learned a lot from them, from my grandparents. I'm very involved in the Dominican Republic with a lot of things going from early 2000s, you know, the DNA study and different things. I try to get involved as much as I can and bring or understand or help like with the tradition and culture over there. And sometimes when we go there, yeah, you know, we're looked at like today was saying, you know, Valerie, that like 20 years behind, you know, in Quisqueya, you know, we go there and bring this Taíno thing and it's like foreign to them, you know. We brought the run last year, the Peace and Dignity run, you know, for the first time over there, bring that run to the island, you know, just bring awareness. So I think if we continue to bring awareness for the future generations, that's what we need to do. And I think that that's what we're trying to do here, bring awareness to each other, what we're doing. And my interest today, I'm hoping to walk away here with is understanding where we're at with language. I think it's important, you know, language. A lot of debates and different things, have some understanding about language, and you know, where we go from here, So, thank you all for inviting me and being part of this. I'm also my family leadership of my ICTU Cayeque Taíno, which has been around for a little while in this movement, and they'll be happy to serve and be part of that. So thank you.
My name is Gypsy. I am a filmmaker, a writer. I've worked with many of you. I've worked with a lot of groups. I've worked formally and informally. My area of focus is a little different now because I look to our language. I've mentioned to some people privately, I mentioned in a message this morning, given what I've learned about the language and the traditions, and I started off as a little guy learning about this. I had a bit of a different experience because my family came from Guayama, so we never told people about our heritage. People were aware of it, people sought us out, and that followed to our move to New York, to Brooklyn, where the family would do consultos and people would come for consultations, but we never, as a policy, ever told outsiders. And this followed through until my grandmother started hearing stories about people, and she said, go meet the people. And I was the grandson that aided her, so it was my responsibility to go out. And that's when, about 25 years ago, I started going out, because my grandmother was still with us at the time. And the only thing, she never had the opportunity to meet people. She had asked, bring them here, and nobody got around to see her. But I maintained that work. And what I look at now are creation stories as our modes of history. Because I think all too often, indigenous people, we've internalized this kind of colonial mindset where we trivialize our own histories, because we kind of think of our ancestors as infantile. as if they did not have the same capacidad. And I think it's important to look at these commonalities. And for instance, and much love and respect, because y'all are my people. I don't identify as Taíno because I identify as Locono Cari. That the term for me brings me closer to home, because I understand Taíno to be a greeting. It's a form of greeting, and it's a form of greeting that's still common among populations of our people that speak the language, the Arawak language. And what I look to also are these earlier stories, because I'm very interested in migrations, in the migrations that have happened. I'm not just talking about migration from the Caribbean, because our people don't just come from the Caribbean, but I'm talking about ancient migrations that form the common populace of the hemisphere, of indigenous peoples. And that's something that really, really interests me. I think it's a really wonderful thing to talk about our connections, not only within our people, but with other indigenous people, because we would find that there is a rich and vibrant history there. And I also believe that it's a way to provide a lot of healing, because our people require healing. We were the first people to encounter this trauma that happened at this, what they call the encuentro, but was invasion. And I think we can do a lot, not only for ourselves, but in providing healing for our relatives and each other, because we are telling our own stories, and we have a right to our own self-determination. And this is something that is not only collective, but that collective has to be within the individual as well, and having that consciousness and that sense of peace to know that you can identify yourself, and that the soldiers aren't going to come barreling your door down and dragging you away. And I think this is, we've seen that kind of gradual progress, and there's much work to remain, because there are the vast majority of people from the homelands that identify by nation state now. So people will say, I come from here, I come from Puerto Rico, I come from Dominican Republic, I come from Haiti, I come from Jamaica, I come from, and whatever Central American country, Latin American country. But these are countries and nation states that took form around us, very much as what happened in this country. And I think it's always important to remember that we are dealing with layers of identity, and that there is no shame at all in being who we are. We are the survivors of a horrendous process that sought our eradication, that still seeks to eradicate us. So the very process of standing up to have a mother talk about her grandchildren, and the process of dedication and love and certainty that goes into protecting them so that they can stand up for themselves, this is the rebuilding process. This is how we heal. So my process is quieter, and people seek me out, and that's fine, because there's no one form, because our identity is fluid and our people are fluid. As we mentioned earlier, there are people that are craftspeople and bricklayers, and there are people who are academics, and there are people, somebody's got to grow the food if you want to eat. So somebody's got to grow the food, and there are people caring for the children. No one job is irrelevant. No one aspect of our people is irrelevant. And that's something that I like to keep in mind, because I think our people are sometimes put on the spot where it's like, well, I don't know. And you don't know because there was a process that sought to remove this knowledge from you. So that's why you don't know, and that's why this is a crucial process. And I think it's wonderful to have some cohesiveness, so that all the different branches of where people are working, that somebody can come together and say, okay, to follow the commonalities, to follow the trail, because it can be a daunting task. And I just think wherever you started, remember what it was like as a lot of people feel like they're floundering. And then you go into an academic setting where you're dismissed as a people. And that's difficult. And you go into a cultural setting where you're only thought of in a folkloric context, and you're also dismissed as a people, and it's exhausting. And then you deal individually with members of your family, and you might have the heritage right in front of you while the same people are dismissing it because it's contextualized by our nationalities and other identities, or it's a heritage herencia that is thought to be just a composition of your family, and there's no greater context to understand that it's herencia. and that it's part of our cultural awareness. So these fasts, this is good work, and I'm grateful to be here, and in whatever way I can support, that's why I'm here. Thank you.
I'm Bert Correa. I'm from the Bronx. I'm also Taíno too. My family comes from Borinquen. My father's side of the family comes from Cuamo, Juanadilla, Salinas, Calle. My mom's side of the family comes from Quebradilla. And so one of the things that brings me here today, I guess I relate a lot to what Ibo said earlier, and with some of the stories I'd like to share with you all. It sort of matches up perfectly with some of the points that Gypsy brought up. I guess I first became aware of this heritage when my mom bought a VHS video camera. They were all the rage at the time, and we happened to visit Borinquen, and staying with my grandmother for a little bit was my great-grandmother, Anastasia Vasquez Vargas, who was born in 1892 and was approximately 102 or 3 years old. My mom recognized that there was a really good opportunity to hear a little bit about our family's history through my great-grandmother's experiences. And one of the many things she said, by the way, I have these tapes if anyone's ever interested in watching them, was that her parents were Indio. So not really realizing how important that was at the time. I don't think I was particularly interested. I think there was a second event that kind of made me a little more interested. This was another trip we took about a year later. I was probably around 13 years old at the time, and I decided to teach my cousins how to break dance. And so it didn't go too well for me. I ended up spraining my neck, right? And I kind of was stuck in this position here. So my parents decided that they'd take us to a hospital in San Juan. Here's some pain relievers. There's not much we can do for you. They decided they'd go to a hospital in Ponce. It was sort of the same result. Here's some pain killers, and there's not much we can do for you. I started to develop a fever. They started to get really concerned and decided, you know what, we may have to cancel the trip and head back to New York to seek medical attention. So I think that my grandmother, who had a grand aunt who lived in the mountains in Calle somewhere, was embarrassed and initially and didn't say anything. But she said, listen, before you guys go, why don't you go see my sister? Or rather her aunt who lives in the mountains. And so we arrive at the lady's house, sort of a last effort before they decided to cancel the trip and head back to New York. And I remember it vividly. You know, it was aluminum walls, corrugated, a palm thatched top, dirt floors. It wasn't a whole lot of furniture. There was like a board nailed into the wall, some wooden crates to sit on, a hammock in the corner. But there were shelves, and on these shelves there were tons and tons of what appeared to me at the time to be baby food jars and mayonnaise jars. And in all of these jars were, from what I can tell, oils and tinctures and dried plants. So the interesting part to me was the lady at the time. I was completely fascinated by the fact that she sort of lights this cigar up and says, okay, I see the problem. Can't remember specifically what she grabbed. I know she heated it up on a spoon and applied it to my neck, and poof, instantly better. So it was a pretty profound experience. Something that the hospitals could not do was fixed in a contemporary bohío somewhere in Calle. So, it made me think about the lesson I learned a year prior, which was that, okay, well, some of this probably is part of that tradition that's handed down from my great-grandmother and her family. So a little later on, a couple years later, probably around 13 or 14 years old, discussing identity one day, I happened to visit a friend of mine who was Boricua, very fair-skinned, blonde hair, blue eyes. And in fact, I didn't realize that her family was from Borinquen until she closes the door on her bedroom. And I see a flag, and I said, oh, okay, so you went to the parade one day. And she said, no, in fact, I'm Boricua. So just talking about what I know today as a Native American phenotype that my family carry, her family carries a different phenotype. She said, well, you look very Native American. I said, well, in fact, I am, because my grandmother told me a couple of years ago when we visited Puerto Rico. So she actually suggested that, hey, you should maybe visit a powwow to see if you find other people with similar stories. Or sure enough, I did. The first person I met long time ago. So the sad part is that there were other Taínos there, but I almost left without making contact with a single one until Gypsy pulled me to the side and says, hey, you're Taíno, right? I end up owing, I want to say thank you to Gypsy, to Robert, to George, when I got the opportunity to now, because they've really have been guides throughout this path my whole life, helping me explore and learn a little more about our culture. So we decide to, or I think it was Casiba Hagua who had a presentation at the Borough of Manhattan Community College a lifetime ago. And right before we go on, Bobby Gonzalez is giving up a slideshow. And most of it was sort of like cultural items, artifacts, and stuff like that from museums in and around Borinquen. Well, up pops a pilon that says belonged to the Correa family from Salinas. So I was super surprised. At the time, I don't think cell phones were very popular. I run to a payphone, I call my father. My father, oh, el pilón de mami. So I guess what happened there, University of Puerto Rico was putting together some Indigenous legacy exhibition, and they were looking for families that still had cultural items that belonged within, I guess, the context of the Taíno culture. And well, they came across my family who had this pilón. Interesting story about that pilón is that it was a wedding gift from my father's mother. I'm sorry, my grandfather's mother, or my great-grandmother, to his wife. And I thought that was pretty amazing. I've asked Bobby a couple times to help me find what museum has it in their collection, but it was so long ago he can't seem to remember. So I'd like to ask all of you at this point, if you ever come across that pilón, please let me know about it. So long story short, I started to see that some of these traditions correlated with a lot of the stories I heard from my family, and then there was something real about these traditions that had been handed down and our identities. A couple of years ago, one of my in-laws, he's my son's uncle, Doug George, who is Ganyenke Haga also, Akwesasne Mohawk specifically. He said something to me while I was dropping my son off and heading back to the city. He said, man, you Taíno have strong hands. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Oh, what do you mean by that? And he said, you guys have been holding on for over 500 years. I said, wow, and I really like that idea. So just moving, I guess, forward in my little speech here, what I want to see for the future is that we continue to keep those hands strong and we can pass this on to our kids, but, not just the traditions that we were all fortunate to receive, but contemporary cultural expressions of who we are today. I think it's super important and gives us our best opportunity to relate to our children, interest them enough to learn, and then hopefully carry on those traditions themselves. So thank you for listening to my story. It's a pleasure to see everybody, meet everyone today.
That was very touching. It was a wonderful story. Yeah. The woman that you speak about, my grandmothers and my great-grandmothers were those type of women. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with women like that. So I grew up seeing that sick people would come and my grandmothers and my mothers would give them things from the garden or from the trees, and they would get better. And we were called espiritistas, but we never called ourselves that. They used to say, yo trabajo la obra, yo hago la obra de caridad, but they never said espiritista themselves, but the people would call us that. So I grew up with that. And I was very close to my great-grandma, and she taught things without necessarily teaching them, like, this is how you do it. It was more like you watched, and then an opportunity would show up, and you would do. So by the time I was 12, actually, and I've written on it in some of the blogs and stuff, I did my first Antiguo when I was 12 years old for a condition called empacho. And so they would bring these children with fevers, bloated bellies, who weren't eating, and diarrhea, and you would touch their stomach and you would go like this, and if it sounded like a hollow drum, you would know that there was something. And it's a massage, and it's a prayer that you have to, that my great-grandmother would say, these things are learned but are not taught. So it, almost like a Zen type of thing that you have to figure out. Now, okay, you learn by seeing. And there was a prayer you had to say, and I said, well, teach me the prayer. He says, if I teach you the prayer, it loses its power. So how do you get the prayer? And it took me a couple of days. The prayer was a deep and true desire to alleviate suffering. That was the prayer. And it had to arise from your heart, and nobody could teach you that. It had to happen. And so I grew up with that. I grew up with women from the city bringing their babies who had colic. And they would take them to the hospitals, and the babies were not getting better. And my mother would say, these were babies that had finished nursing, and they started taking the milk, the cow milk, and they're developing all these problems. And my mom would say, the bark of a tree, amasigo blanco. Amasigo, you boil that bark, and you feed them that tea for 24 hours before you start giving them cow milk. And it helps them not to develop those type of problems. And my great-grandmother taught me that you never take anything. You don't take from the tree, you don't take from the plant, you don't take from any of this without speaking to them and telling them why you're taking from them. Because they are people too. My great-grandmother would say, they all have their languages, their own language. And you have to tell them why. So I would say, I'm picking this. May I pick this? In Spanish, we would say, because so-and-so has an earache. You have to tell them why. And then you leave something, she said. Cornmeal, tobacco, spit, a song, something. You don't take without. I grew up with that. And then when I came to this country, I wanted to fit in. And so, like many of us, I walk in two roads. On the outside, I'm Domingo Hernandez. I work with the developmentally disabled. I went to school, I have my master's, and I've been working in this field for the past 30 years. I give lectures at the Department of Education to talk about transition and the services and blah, blah, blah. On another level, I'm Ture, who assist in the obra for those that request. As simple as that. My involvement in the Taíno movement happened 25, maybe 30 years ago, in my spiritual practice, hearing a voice And the voice said, you will be part of a group that would help to awaken Taíno consciousness in Boriquen. So I understood right away that I was going to be part of something. Not that I would be leading anything, not that I would be directing anything. It said I would be a part of it and that I would be helping. And I think that that has always been my mission. At least that's how I see it. My friends that are here maybe can testify if I did it or not. That's my goal, is to be a helper. To be a helper by listening, to be a helper by offering my hands, to be a helper by maybe intuiting what may be happening individually or collectively. And then that I share, and my prayers. I come from a line of people who knew that they were of indigenous background. My grandfather actually did use the word Taíno, though his mother did not. She used the word Indio. So, that's fine. My hope and dream, why did this voice say this? And I'm not the only one who's heard a voice. I'm not the only one who's had visions. That first meeting that we went to 25 to 30 years ago with Sibanacan and all these other people that were there, I counted the people in that basement, and there were 62 to 65 people. And as we went around in a circle, about 30 of them said that they had dreamed or seen or heard. And to me, that says that this is bigger than us. This is planned somewhere by the ancestors, who I believe are very much alive. And they do not want to be forgotten. And we are the ancestors of tomorrow, and we're hoping that this work is not forgotten, so that 100 years from now, there may be no doubt that the indigenous people from the Caribbean were there, are here, and will be there.
I never said this publicly, but I was raised in a Jibaro lifestyle, Jibaro. My great-grandmother, it was her choice. She just said it, which is, I guess, very Taíno. That's going to be my, I'm going to raise that kid. My mother protested, my father, and so on. But I happened to be one of those children that, you don't go against mama, So she raised me. And the things that she showed me, not like through words or, I guess show and tell, right? She had all the saints, she had all the food for the saints. Before abortion was legal, she was the person that gave the abortion. So I had a lot of women come to the house, to the apartment in Brooklyn. I found out after her death that she was, I guess you call her a piritita or culandera. She did a lot of healings, she did a lot of midwifery things, also abortions and so on, which a lot of my family members later on in life, kind of, when they shared this with me, they were kind of upset at that, But this is the reality, right? Coming from she was raised in Guamo, so we probably have a little blood there, I have family in Calle, Guamo, Orocovis, and I find in my family history, if you say something about being an Indian or Taíno, it was always like a taboo, And that caught my interest. Man, why do these people want to hide this so much? Why do my relatives get so mad at me if I bring this up, especially when I became an adult and really started investigating? I have an aunt called La India. They call La India Ila Ramos, and they always used to get upset if I used to talk to her, So that really caught my curiosity a lot. Became what a lot of people say, an obsession. A lot of you probably heard that from friends and stuff. Why are you so obsessed about this? So I remember I was a friar in the Franciscan order, and there was a conference I was in, and a lot of my colleagues, and brothers, they knew I was Taíno, and they encouraged that. I even went to Montana. They paid for it. I met the Crow Nation there. It was a real beautiful experience. But what happened was I met this Spaniard priest from, I believe he was from, I forget, I think Madrid. He was a scholar, talking about, Franciscan studies. And he specifically came to me, really angry at me. I remember I was eating, like, whoa, what's going on? He says, "You're not Taíno. You are not Taíno." Like, what? I was really shaking, This old priest, right? It's like, what do you mean? He says, your people were killed, man. They were killed. And I don't like what's going on. I guess the movement was catching traction, back in the 90s, early 90s and stuff. And I was shaking. I couldn't even talk back to him, couldn't defend myself. So afterwards, when I calmed down, I said, son of a gun, why are people so threatened about us? What is this? So I went with that, and, reading the history, getting together with friends and family. I was like, wow, yeah, I guess in a way we are a threat because we do expose a lot of stuff that went on that wasn't too good. And so I guess the legacy that I want to leave my children, my family, and more and more want to commit more to people here is that, we don't have a pretty history. And somehow there was a system in place to, keep this knowledge down, And it's very important, more than ever, is to unify. I see that more and more now. The scholars are going to write what they're going to write, We're probably going to be the last to be asked, right? But that's all right. It's all part of the process. But I do want to share this because that priest was threatened by our existence, He was really threatened. And he wanted to tell me who I was, or who I am, whatever. So I was like, wow, this is deep. I like to end this. I was raised with the story of Hatue by an uncle. He wasn't blood, but he was part of the family. And I remember, too, people didn't like hearing that story in my family about Hatue. So whenever I hear that story, that's, now my uncle wasn't educated. He was a Hibalo man, but yet that story stood out. So for me, that was like the best lesson I learned in life, about that resistance, Hatue, So I guess what I want to share this morning is I'm so happy to be here. I didn't listen to that priest. And I know a lot of people out there, they do listen, and they lose it. They lose touch. So, hey, I'm committed. Help anyone here. Trying to keep going, And we're still here, right?
Bueno, primeramente, Takají, buen día a todos. Antes de todo, le quiero dar te traje un cigarro, que es costumbre nuestra. Uno para ti y otro para Jorge, que no sé dónde está. ¿Dónde está Jorge Barcote? Dándote las gracias. Ajá. Dándote las gracias por invitarnos aquí y a este círculo. Y por todos los trabajos que ustedes dos están haciendo, porque tú llevas muchos años en esto, desde que te conozco. Desde el principio de los 90, por ahí estás tú en esto. Y Jorge también, I think que cada vez que yo vengo al museo, Jorge estaba aquí. Me recuerdo cuando él comenzó con un librito, poniendo las cosas taínas. Estos son para ustedes. Si lo aceptas, ahorita te lo puedes llevar. Muchos de ustedes me conocen ya. Mi nombre es Inaru Niquía, siendo mi nombre indígena. Mi nombre, según el calendario Bristol, porque así eran que los abuelos buscaban los nombres de uno. Tú nacías el día tal y tal y ese era el nombre que te respetaban. Y ahí te quedabas con ese nombre. Entonces, ese nombre siendo Cruz es el primer nombre. Pero everybody knows me como Ina. Para llegar a contestar la pregunta que tú hiciste desde el principio, de qué me trajo a mí aquí, muchos de los cuentos que ustedes están diciendo, pues yo también los viví. Pues yo nací en Río Piedras. Y nací al son de comadrona. Así es que ya ustedes saben que con que yo nací con comadrona, tienen poco más o menos una idea de cuántos años tengo ya. Porque ahora todo el mundo nace en hospital. Bueno, yo me crié también en campo. Y me crié también con costumbres que en aquel entonces para mí eran muy boricuas. Muy puertorriqueñas, muy boricuas. Sí nos decían que éramos indios, que éramos indios. Nunca en realidad escuché la palabra taíno, sino somos indios. Tenía una abuelita que se llamaba abuelita Choló, y cocinaba afuera en un fogón. Y ella todo lo que hacía, tenía, igual que dijo aquí, tenía un montón de potes en la pared, lleno de cuanta plantita, matita y todo. Y así hacían sanaciones. Mi abuelito era un tiro. Si usted tenía un tobillo virado, enseguida se ponía un cigarro en la boca y te arreglaba el tobillo. Hacían santiguos, como dice él. Así que yo crecí con todo eso. ¿Entiendes? Y entiendo, siempre supe quién era. Para mí, yo era boricua. Y para mí todos los boricuas eran indios. O sea, yo no veía ninguna diferencia. Todo el mundo era indio, todo el mundo era boricua. Yo vine a notar una diferencia cuando yo vine aquí a este país. En la manera en que nosotros vivíamos, más apegado a la tierra, con más conocimiento de la tierra, con más amor a las medicinas, con más amor a nuestra espiritualidad, con más amor y unión familiar. Que aquí, cuando yo vine a los Estados Unidos, yo vi la diferencia. Yo vi que había una cultura muy diferente a la mía. No solamente en el idioma, sino en las maneras que hacían las cosas. La forma de pensar, la forma de hacer todo, era muy diferente. Y como todo buen boricua, pasé mucho trabajo para aprender a hablar el English. Porque es muy difícil. Lo más que me molestaba era la actitud. Había una actitud en este país que yo no la experimenté en Borinquen. Había racismo. Aquí había racismo. Trataban a uno muy mal. Consideraban que era uno un bruto, que era uno estúpido. Y si tú venías y encontrabas un boricua que venía de la ciudad, vamos a suponer de San Juan, de la capital, y tú venías del campo, pues tú eras un jíbaro bruto. Porque los jíbaros eran brutos, supuestamente. Y si tenías un poquito de raza negra, pues tú eras un negro. Todas esas cosas afectaban a uno en el sentido de uno, en realidad, decir, pues, ¿quién soy yo entonces? ¿A dónde quepo yo dentro de este mosaico, dentro de este enredo? ¿Quién soy yo? Y mantener suerte tuve, porque aún aquí en los Estados Unidos mi familia mantuvo muchas de nuestras costumbres, porque vivíamos en un núcleo boricua, en los barrios, donde todavía se practicaban todo lo que nosotros practicábamos allá, lo practicábamos aquí. Poco a poco, con el tiempo, eso se fue perdiendo. Se fue perdiendo. Por ejemplo, mi abuelito era tabaquero y enganchaba las hojas para secarlas de tabaco. Aún aquí en los Estados Unidos lo hacía. No sé cómo él podía conseguir que vinieran las hojas para acá, porque eso no te lo puedo decir. Pero sí llegaban aquí, right? Llegaban aquí. Y en los barrios enganchaban las hojas y se hacían todas esas cosas. Aquí se desarrolló una cultura en los barrios muy boricua, muy puertorriqueña, que de ahí resultaron muchas cosas. Y entonces nuestros hijos empezaron a ir a la escuela, a aprender, a tratar de echar para adelante, como se dicen, académicamente. Ese es el sistema americano. Pero dentro de ese sistema se perdió mucho de lo nuestro. Mucho de nuestra sabiduría. Porque ser taíno, aparte de la genética, también es un legado espiritual. Algo que viene desde el alma para afuera. O sea, tú tienes esa memoria escrita dentro de tu sistema genético. Está escrito en tu DNA. Y entonces vivirlo es más difícil en un sistema que lo que está buscando es eliminar lo indígena. Nosotros no queremos más indios. ¿Quién quiere más indios aquí? No se quieren. Entonces, fue difícil. Con esa idea y con esos pensamientos, tratando de ser quien yo era, porque yo sabía quién yo era. Nunca tuve duda y siempre me sentí orgullosa de ser boricua y a mucha honra. Me involucré, que recuerdo diciéndole a mi mamá, mi viejita, que hoy día tiene 97 años, doña Victoria Padilla Correa. ¿Sí? Le dije, mami, encontré un grupo que dicen que son taínos, que son indios y todo, y tal vez ahí yo pueda aprender y podemos seguir. Hay más gente como nosotros, hay más como nosotros, yo quiero ver. Y ahí me involucré en el movimiento indígena aquí en Nueva York, en los Estados Unidos, que conocí precisamente Lizzie, que te conocí, que estaban entonces cantando con un grupo del norte que le decían Arrowhead Mountain Singers, a todo lo que da al norte, ahí estaban todos ellos, y Jorge también. Y yo fui a parar para allá enseguida, para esa iglesia, y los vi, que estaban ellos allá, y yo, oh, espera, ¿dónde están los boricuas, los taínos? Pero como estaban tocando el tambor, yo dije, bueno, aquí no están. Pero sí hablé con ellos, hablé con Lizzie, hablé con Al Boldigo, con todos ellos. Conocí a René Sibanacán, que el señor estaba muy involucrado en el movimiento. Y así poco a poco lo fui conociendo a todos ustedes. Y sabiendo y mirando, ¿verdad? Y estaba contenta. ¿Por qué? Porque yo pienso, que este legado espiritual que nosotros tenemos, esta sabiduría antigua que nosotros tenemos, esto que nosotros llevamos por dentro, de una forma o de la otra nos va a ayudar. Nos va a ayudar a ser mejores personas y a contribuir algo a este mundo que está enredado. Porque desde que este mundo está enredado, la tierra en sí, ¿entiendes?, está en son de guerra, con tanto maltrato. Tenemos los vicios, las drogas, se ha perdido los morales, los principios, los valores, todas esas cosas que son tan lindas, que dice familia. Y eso se está perdiendo porque nos estamos olvidando de quiénes somos. Y no estamos practicando y viviendo nuestro indigenismo, nuestra cultura. Y entonces para mí estos círculos son muy importantes. ¿Por qué? Porque también tenemos que recordarnos que no somos I, sino we. Somos we. Y juntos podemos no solamente aprender más de nuestra cultura y volver a renacer, porque es como volver a renacer, ¿no? Pero también regalarle al mundo, a toda la humanidad, algo bonito, unas lecciones que nosotros tenemos, una sabiduría tan bonita, tan ancestral, que tal vez eso pueda ayudar no solamente a nosotros, pero a las futuras generaciones de toda la humanidad sobre la tierra. Porque es un legado espiritual y es nuestro deber. Porque yo sí creo, porque mi abuelito lo decía, que somos responsables por el bienestar de la tierra. Cada cual de nosotros somos responsables. Y por eso estoy aquí. Estoy aquí, me siento muy contenta de verlos a todos ustedes, los más jóvenes también, porque muchos de ustedes están jóvenes todavía. Y espero que ustedes puedan seguir con este legado y formalizar una fundación fuerte para las futuras generaciones. Y gracias a los académicos también, porque los estudios y las cosas que ellos han hecho nos han dado a reducir muchas cosas. Por ejemplo, mi abuelito no leía nada, así que él no sabía quién era Panay, ni que de la casa ni nada, porque él no leía. Él no sabía leer. Mi abuela no leía. Nadie, allá no había libros. So nobody knew how to read. Pero sí vivían. Y el indigenismo se vive. Y es la mejor forma que se puede aprender, viviéndolo. Y tal vez, con toda esta información que tenemos, ahora que nos estamos dando cuenta que muchas de las costumbres nuestras son indígenas, porque nos estamos dando cuenta ahora que son indígenas, las podemos poner en práctica y podemos traer a la mesa de la humanidad algo más bonito de lo que hoy día hay. Por eso estoy aquí.
Takahi Waitiao, Taka Mukaro, Aguibana, Boriken Taíno Daka. I just wanted to say greetings to everyone and just introduce myself in that way. I'm also, like many, interested in the language and seeing that as a part of who we are, and starting out in that way helps me for these occasions, right? When we're with our relatives, and connects me to my ancestors, right? And just reminds me that I'm connected to something else that's larger than myself. And just very happy and honored and just humbled to be here and just to listen to everybody's story and where they come from and a little about what they've been through, and really just listening and just remembering some of the connections that some of us had over the years, and good times, bad times, beautiful, ugly, but we're still here, you know. And that, I'm proud of that. Proud to see people and taking on their responsibilities or working in their areas of focus, things that interest them, but still being proud of who they are and not forgetting. Myself, I was the first one in my family to be born in New York. I was born in Mount Sinai Hospital in El Barrio. And both my parents, born in Boriquén. My mother's family coming from the northeast of the island. My father's family coming from the southwest. And I feel, again, very fortunate that as a young child, my mother was the very first one who told us as children about our indigenous heritage, and she used the word Taíno. So I'm always appreciative of that, because that started the seed, you know, the seed that was planted and took root as I have grown. I was also very fortunate that my parents took me back to Boriquén when I was very young. And I remember one of the first meetings that I had with my father's side of the family, and when we were driving into Guayanilla, and I remember my mother saying, "Now, you have to remember, boys, these guys don't live like we live. They live a little different. And sometimes they call those people jíbaros." And we didn't know what, you know, any of that meant. And you know, but we saw it in action. You know, when we arrived, we saw, you know, that how people lived in a rural area, because not all Indios lived in the mountains, you know. Some of us lived in the coast, hiding in plain sight, you know. Right there, fishermen and that building nasas, you know, the traps and that whole culture. So I was able to see that at a very young age. And I felt fortunate, one, that I had that understanding from my mother, and two, that I saw that in my father's family, that lifestyle that was still very much alive at that time. And I remember my uncle, we called them all uncles, even though that they were grandfathers, brothers, or they were all uncles to us. And I remember my uncle Domingo, his name probably the same way. They looked at the calendar, and he was born on the Sunday, so that was his name. He used to call himself, they didn't even have last names, really. You know, they used to say, "Mo, my name is Jose Domingo," you know. And they didn't have birth certificates and all that. They went years later to get that stuff. And he took me to his little house, which was similar to other homes that were mentioned in this circle, very rural, rustic, and he called it a bohío. And he took myself and my brother to a river nearby in Guayanilla, and he says, "Oh, do you want to go see some bats?" And we were like, "Oh, cool." You know, we were coming from the city, you know, inner city. We hear about bats and things that, you know, that's kind of like interesting to us, little kids. So he sat down there, and we sat by that river. And I remember my brother chasing the lizards. You know, again, they called them by their Taíno names. Take them, put them on their ears like earrings. You know, they would clip them on and run around them all over the place. And then my uncle would proceed to tell us, he looked at a cave across the way, and he goes, "You know, that's where the bats live." And he proceeded to tell us a story about the creation of the bat. It made a big impression on me, because, what I knew, Batman, vampires, that. But, when I heard him talk about these things, it was very interesting. And years later, I remember I was at one of the libraries that the Instituto de Cultura Puertorriqueña has in San Juan, and I was looking through a book, and lo and behold, I see this same story that was compiled by Ricardo Alegría. And apparently he had went around to the campus and was interviewing peoples and taking stories that he understood and recognized as being part of our indigenous legacy. And there was the same story that my uncle told me. And I was like, well, look at that, Getting to that library, right, is another story, right? How we get to those places and how we become involved in this, with all the love and the heartache that it brings. But I think for me, one of the reasons that I felt very strongly about this, being vocal about my affirmation about my indigenous heritage, was I remember going to high school in Long Island, New York, and I was like one of the first times that I experienced racism directly for being darker skinned in a predominantly Caucasian area, And I remember the kids were like, "What do we call you? You're not black, you're not white." And I said, "Well, I am an Indian, And that kind of shocked kids. And for me, it was a natural thing. My mother told me about it. I saw it in Guayanilla, and but what was amazing was their shock, their lack of understanding about that. And I remember by the time I got to high school, we were going to class, and then we got to the situation where Columbus comes to America, and then the next thing we're talking about the Mayans. And I was like, well, wait a minute, wasn't there something else that happened? Like, who did Columbus meet, And when I had challenged the teacher on that, he says, well, those folks were all wiped out. And I remember I said, well, hold, wait a second, let me get this straight. You're telling me that Columbus came here and all of our folks were wiped out, but I come from that, I remember growing up. My mother told me about it. My grandmother told me about it. My grandpas, my uncles, they all knew about it. So how come you don't know about it? You're supposed to be the teacher, And that set it up. And now this is high school. And not to say that I immediately dived into the culture because, we're in America, right? We have distractions. You want to fit in, You don't want to be different. But I remember so many times, as probably many of you, being singled out as different. I remember being on work sites when I used to work construction, and they said, "You Cherokee?" No, not Cherokee, not today, And, being in other places, "Hey, brother, you Hawaiian, you're one of us?" "No, man, I'm from another island, But people saw that affinity somehow, And that made an impression on me. Years later, going through my own personal stuff, and I'm sure some of you have gone through that, we go through in our youth and that, we start meeting people. I remember going to a powwow in Shinnecock Reservation on Long Island. And I'm looking at the booths and the stands, and one of these folks come over and say, "Where you from, brother?" I'm like, "I live over here, just a couple towns away, And they're like, "No, where you from? Who are your people?" And they said, "I come from Puerto Rico. My family comes from Puerto Rico." "No, man, what's your tribe? You're Taíno, right?" And I was shocked that he knew the word. I thought I only knew that word, And so that made an impression on me. So I guess what I'm saying is that these meetings, this understanding of who we are, but yet going to institutions and being told that we don't exist, I guess that started me off because I didn't like that, you know? There was something disrespectful about it. Something disrespectful in the way that folks who went through an educational system that was brought over by a colonial process, you know, were able to tell other people who they were in their own homeland, you know? That bugged me. So I started like other folks, you know, looking around, getting involved, and met a lot of good people, you know, still consider them good people. And that's important, what I just said, good people, because some people say, you know, my grandfather, they only said Indio. But I think if you're a real Boricua, or if you're a real Indio, you know what buena gente means. And they said, no, esa gente son buena gente. And that's exactly what Taíno means. So we might have not been saying it using that word, but they were saying it. They knew who they were. And they said it over and over, you know. So we knew we were Taíno always. So, you know, I've gotten involved in some levels. I've been fortunate to travel a bit to see some of the things that Jose has mentioned, to seeing that movement, you know, coming out of connecting from people coming out of the civil rights movement from the 60s and 70s, when all kinds of people were saying, this is who I am, black power, red power, you know, all these things were coming up. We were just a part of that too, you know. The problem is that I don't think it's a resurgence so much, it's just how people have directed their energies. In the past, our energies had to be directed towards our families because our tribal structure was taken down. The caciques, their place was lost in the estimation of the people, because if you know about the way the colonization happened, many of the caciques turned into the foremans of the haciendas. Yeah. They saved their family, but forgot about everybody else. So that system broke down. So it became clans, families, you know, and I saw that, you know, and I see that. And as I started to move around, I started to see everybody with these similar stories. Oh, my family Indio from here, from this clan over here, and a very large clan. And they'd move from this side because some of them went to go pick coffee, right? So they work sometimes, and they go seasonally, moving from this side to this side, or they went down, you know, some worked with fishermen. Then those folks moved over here, some of those family members, but doesn't mean we were not connected to the people who told us we were Indians in the first place, just because we came to the States. You know, so I never saw this movement as separated. I just saw that after a time, we had to move from beyond our families and had to start connecting again and bringing our voices larger, because we were losing so much. I saw so much change, not even living in Boriking, from the time of visiting my grandfather to the time I went back to when we went to bury him, which we did in an old way, procession, blowing the guamo down the streets of Guayanilla. You know, everybody doesn't do that, you know. So that's part of my story. I'm very fortunate to be connected to so many of you through organizations and this, and I just think that it's probably downright criminal for people to continue to say today that the Taínos were wiped out, you know. And I think that that's an impetus for me to be a part of this movement, because I don't want my children to go through the same thing that I had to go through, you know, about reading. So now it's our turn to write the books. And so some of these people don't want to let go, right? And it's time to let go. And, you know, we're here, and I'm very happy to be among all of you.
I'm from Bani, Ocoa, from Dominican Republic, Quiqueya. And well, I'm here just para compartir con ustedes, you know, contribute and hear everybody's story, put it all together. Because one of the most interesting things to me when I was first growing up was something that Roberto actually mentioned. He said that they told him that we were all wiped out, right? And I remember being in the 5th grade, I was being read kind of like from a history book by the teacher, and he said, and then Columbus came, and then everybody got killed, all the Indians got killed. They used weapons, they used dogs, they used guns, they used all this. I cried, because I said, how could somebody be that way? But I said, I'm still here, right? I had no idea. Nobody had ever said, oh, you know, we're Indian in this family. You know, they would call me Indio because of my skin color. They wouldn't call me Indio because that's, you know, what we were, or that's what we, you know, whatever. But something else interesting that I heard here was that we were hiding in plain sight. Another thing that I heard. And I feel like it is that way in a lot of ways. A lot of our cultural practices that we have right now, they're in plain sight. You know, you don't have to be, like some people say, in the bohío, stark naked with the beads and the jewelry and all this. You don't necessarily have to be that. Although I believe everybody in here, our ancestors were that. We don't necessarily have to be that. If we listen to our parents, our grandparents, our relatives, we'll hear que estaba de guararé, pero déjese tereque, and you're like, what is that, right? And those things all come together. That's what made me look into this, right? Into what we are, into what we have, or what our culture is. When I was growing up, or you know, I'm still growing up, I'm only 19. But when I was growing up, and even just the other day, somebody said to me, because people get confused when they look at me, they don't know what I am, right? We're very ambiguous looking. So, right? People, I've gotten Pacific Islander, I've gotten Middle Eastern, I've gotten South American, I've gotten Cherokee, I haven't got black ones. You know, we're all over the place. So, somebody will always say, oh, I knew you were some kind of Spanish, I just didn't know what kind. And I say, well, that's interesting, you know, because Spanish, Spain, that's the Iberian Peninsula. I had no idea Dominican Republic was somehow in Spain, right? I say, oh no, but you know, you speak Spanish and you do all this Spanish stuff. I'm like, well, you don't have any idea what you're saying, so I'm gonna enlighten you. And then we have a conversation, you know. When people kind of like spread this kind of ignorance, I try not to push them away. I try to make them realize rather than, you know, chastise them or whatever. But that's definitely something that always gets me, no matter what. Hey, que tú eres, you're Spanish. No. We have our own things. This is us, right here. Everything that we're talking about, everything that, you know, la arepa, all these dulce, la batata, all this, you know, these things that we do, our foods, the way that we live, all the stories that we hear from our parents and our grandparents and all this, that's us. España no es nosotros. We're not Spain. Some of us might have Spanish ancestors. That's irrelevant. They came to Dominican Republic, they came to Puerto Rico, they came to Cuba, came to Haiti, Jamaica. They're from there now, and they made that choice, however long ago it was. And some of these stories that I hear a lot of people talking about que la cueva, que curando, que this. When I was growing up, my father would always tell me these stories about curanderos from the town. And one of the things that they would do, and this was very secret among them, as we've heard here, they would go to the caves by the rivers, and nobody followed them up there, nobody knew what they were doing up there. The only thing that we could speculate, or what they could speculate at the time, was that they were getting power from the Indians. They had their own altars, they had their own ways to seek and to gain power from there. Then they'd come down and they'd do people favors and they'd help them, y lo curaba. And that's one of the things that that comes down from that past, ese conocimiento antiguo. That's one thing that my father always said. We have, his father never knew how to read and write. He only knew how to write his signature. Pero él tenía un conocimiento antiguo. In other words, an ancient knowledge. You don't have to go to school to learn it, to be a good person, to have these, esta costumbre que llevamos, which is always very interesting to me. And he would always tell me about how they would do things over there. Like, me contaba cómo hacer un bohío. Decía, tienes que cortarlo a cierto tiempo, cuando esté la luna de esta manera, tienes que cortar el palo, porque si no, se te pudre, que no te dura nada, no te dura ni un año. So he would tell me about this bohío that was in our old place that we used to live in Banis. We've been there for hundreds of years at that point. And one of the things that he told me was, oh, you know, tu abuelo cortó ahí unos palos, y puso un bohío. Y eso lleva ahí casi 100 años. Un bohío dura 100 años. Y él me dijo, sí. You want to know why it lasts so long? Because you cut it right. That's the only reason. So that's the kind of thing that I think we need to focus on, and that makes us who we are. You know, nobody could, because I hear a lot of things that, oh yeah, you know, Taíno qué? You know, you're Indian? I don't think so, whatever. But it's in everything that we do. Everything that we do. Todo el mundo aquí, everybody here se fija. We see it. Other people don't see it because they don't look for it. They're not conscious of it. But just like anything else, if you're looking for something, you'll find it. You'll see it. It'll be clear to you night and day. And that's what I think that we have here, and that's what I think everybody else needs to have outside of, you know, just us. And a lot of people are starting to have it now. And it's very important for us. And, bueno, también para decirlo, you guys notice my hair, right? When I first started growing it out a few years ago, I got a lot of resistance from like my parents and whatnot. Said, oh, if you don't cut your hair, I'm gonna kick you out. All this stuff. So I was like, I want to see you try. I don't know what was wrong with me. I want to see you try. So I grew it out anyway. My dad made me cut it once, but it came back. And because I was looking for that, you know, I wanted to see what it looked like. I wanted to see what all these things were, and this was one of the things that kind of like pulled me to it. But one of my friends, he doesn't really identify as Taíno. He's one of those, you know, my dad told me that my grandfather is Taíno, full-blooded. And I look at him and I'm like, all right, so? And he says, yeah, but I'm not. And okay, because he's a habao, you know. He has like puffy hair and whatnot, so. But he gave me a name for it. Me llamó Tiringüillo. I don't know if anybody here knows what that means, Tiringüillo. But Tiringüillo is the sweeping part of a broom. So it's, you know, when you sweeping up, this the straw. So he named me that because of my hair. But I think that's one of the things that we need to also keep alive, you know. Those things still happen right now. This is not something that happened 500 years ago. Somebody got their name. This happened maybe a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago when I first started. And y estamos aquí ya. You know, that's it.
I was raised by my mom mostly, and she raised me and my siblings with stories about Anacaona and Kaonabo and Hatue and all of her heroes who were Incas, who were from South America, from all over the world. So we were raised with stories of people that loved who they come from, and they loved their homeland so much that they fought for it with all their hearts and all their lives. And that's really what my mother, what she did as well. And that's something that I aspire to do. I'm also a researcher. I've studied resistance movements and resurgence movements, mostly in the north where I come from. And I'm also part of a group of people. We really draw on those legacies of the resistance that all of our peoples have lived for the last 500 years. We're a group of connectors. We're not leaders or advisors or anything, but we hold really strongly to those histories, and we're calling it the Indigenous nationhood movement. And it's not something that we're saying is new. Obviously, it's not new. It's a continuance of the struggle and the love and the empowerment of our people. And everything that every single person has said today, and with the Spanish speakers, the little bits that I could catch, everything that you said is true from all the people that I come from as well. I'm Inuit and also part of a Dene family, and so my roots are strongest in the north, and a lot of the work that we try to do is to connect the struggles across different nations, connect our communities, and try to draw strength from one another across those boundaries that have set us apart. And when I came here to New York in the fall, I got in touch with Jose and also with George, and I've come to visit George many times at the museum, and every time I go home and I'm in tears, because it's so powerful to do this work of reconnecting. I lost my mom when I was 14, and that was almost 14 years ago. And when I spend the time with my uncle, with George, and also being in this room, I feel her spirit, and it's been teaching me something. We say that the ancestors are with us. We say that they're alive, that they're in us, and I haven't expected to feel my mom in this way. It's been so long, but I feel it, and there's no denying it. And the other part I feel is it's like coming closer to the home fire, and you feel that light and that strength and that warmth, and it's a source of life and who we are. And the work that all of you do and that all of you have shared is it's healing and it's strengthening, and I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
My name is Miguel Sagué. I was born in Santiago de Cuba. I'm old. I'm one of the oldest people here. When I was a little boy, growing up in my country, from the very beginning, I don't remember any time when I wasn't, somebody used the word obsessed, when I wasn't obsessed with the concept of indigeneity, Indianness. I looked for everything that was Indian in everything. I borrowed a chisel and a hammer from my uncle when I was about 7 or 8, and I was pounding boards, making what are you making? I'm making petroglyphs. Making petroglyphs in my grandmother's yard, backyard and el patio, because the houses of the old houses are all around a patio that's outside and inside at the same time, because it doesn't have a roof. You see the sky, but you're inside the house. And that's where I grew up, in places like that. My father was very much, he was very patient with this obsession of mine, and would tell me, yes, you know, there's connection with our family. In El Caney, there's a place called El Caney, not too far from Santiago, where the monks back in the 1600s collected up all the Indians rounded up all the Indians that were left in the area after the encomienda system was abolished, and they started bringing in all the Africans, and they collected them up and put them in El Caney, and that's where they were living. And so he took me to El Caney. I was all excited. I want to see the Indians now, okay? And then I go to El Caney. Everybody looked like us. I say, where are the Indians? Where are the feathers? Mijo, these are the Indians. This is us. This is what we are now. I was still disappointed, you know. I wanted to see the feathers. And another time, and this is in the 50s, my father took me up in the mountains in the Sierra Maestra in the 50s. And if anybody knows about recent Cuban history, going into the Sierra Maestra in the 50s is kind of a dicey situation because there were people shooting at each other at that time. But we went up into a mountain and into a cave, and they were real petroglyphs. There were drawings on the walls. And even as a little boy, I realized that there was something important there, that these things were talking to me and that they had a message. It was the rocks that were speaking to me. And I still carry that with me to this day. My family is very closely embroiled in the history of Cuba, in the recent history of Cuba. I have people on both sides of the conflict of the 50s. My father was very revolutionario. He was very involved in the 26 de Julio event. 26 de Julio means 26th of July. And it represents the date of the first armed manifestation of armed struggle of the revolution that eventually won in 1959. And it happened in a place that was an army barracks called El Cuartel Moncada, right there in the city that I was born in. And I was 2 years old at the time, and the rebels attacked the barracks, and they were hoping that it would start a big battle in Santiago, but it failed. And a lot of them went across the street to the hospital Saturnino Lora, where my uncle was the director of the hospital. My uncle was Dr. Norberto Machiran. And my uncle had to deal with some of the wounded rebels and some of the wounded soldiers from the battle across the street. And eventually the soldiers won. They came and dragged all the rebels out and shot a lot of them right there in cold blood. The wounded rebels were actually murdered right there in front of my uncle, the director of Saturnino Lora Hospital. On the other side of the family, my wife's two uncles were soldiers that were quartered in the barracks. One was actually killed during the battle. I can't remember the uncle that was killed, and the other one was wounded. So you see, in many families in Santiago, there was that. It was kind of like the Civil War in the United States, where you talk about brother against brother. There was that conflict between people. So before I go a little deeper into the Taíno aspect of what I took out of that when I came to the United States, I want to make a little reference to these recent commercials by the Bacardi company. I don't know if any of you have noticed the Bacardi commercials of we survived this and we survived that and we survived, and then we were kicked out of the country. Bacardi company was actually based in my city, in Santiago. That was the main brewing factory, and my uncle was one of the chemists, and he was one of the people that were sent in the 50s to Puerto Rico to found the brewery in Puerto Rico. Now Bacardi, Emilio Bacardi, the first mayor of the city of Santiago after after Cuba got its independence back in 1889, established the first museum in Santiago that housed Taíno objects. My first experience with Taíno artifacts was in that museum, founded by one of the scions of the Bacardi family. You guys drink Bacardi rum? I was looking at Bacardi artifacts, okay, in Santiago de Cuba. When we came out of Cuba, we came to the United States. We established ourselves in Erie, Pennsylvania, in the north, in one of the coldest places on the face of the earth, except for Nome, Alaska. And I came in contact there because I was still crazy about Indian culture. I came in contact there with the Seneca tradition. The Seneca people were right across the border in the Tonawanda Reservation in New York State, right there along the Lake Erie. And I began to learn something about one of the most important aspects of the Seneca experience was a man called Handsome Lake. When the Senecas had been totally suppressed, oppressed, destroyed, their culture had been destroyed, and a lot of people were turning into drunks, this man came out of a drunken stupor and said, I had a vision. I got to do something to recover what we lost. And it was a spiritual vision. It was a religious vision. He organized the people around a new version, a new reconstituted version of the culture. And he called it the Longhouse. Gaiwio, the good news. And they do it around this, they center it around this structure called the Longhouse, which is a physical structure, but it's also a spiritual structure. I was there, because now you can't go in if you're not a Seneca, but I'm old, so I was there when it was still okay. And I sat at the midwinter ceremonies of the Cold Spring Longhouse in the Allegheny Indian Reservation. This was a big inspiration for me, because I felt if that longhouse could be rebuilt, then our longhouse could be rebuilt too. And you know the name of our longhouse? It's the same name as that town that my father brought me to, where the Indians were supposed to be. It was called Caney, El Caney. So I said to myself, you know what? Maybe I can be part of bringing a new Caney to this people, my people, the Taíno people. So I started first dealing with North American Indian culture in the 70s. I found out about a newspaper, a movement newspaper. There was a lot of fervent, a lot of fermentation of Taíno awareness, of indigenous awareness in the United States. I became wrapped up in it. So I found out about a newspaper called Akwesasne Notes. It was based out of the Mohawk Reservation. Somebody else just mentioned Akwesasne a couple of minutes ago. Akwesasne Notes, so I became, because I'm an artist, I draw and paint. And I started from my college, Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. I started sending drawings up. I was a corresponding artist. They would send me, okay, you gotta draw this. And I would make the drawing and send it up there by mail. It was all done by mail. And the editor of Akwesasne, and you know, me and Jose have been doing a little dance around each other. We kind of been in the same circles through most of these last 30 years, but never actually made direct connection, because I know in some ways you were associated with Akwesasne Notes too. Exactly. That was around the time that I was, in the 1970s. Okay? So these two Cuban Taínos are dancing around each other, but never actually meeting. Okay? So my editor in Akwesasne Notes told me, you know, we're making a partnership with another newspaper based out of California. It's called Indigenous, and they deal with more Latin culture stuff you may be interested in illustrating for them too. So I said, okay. So he hooked me up with the editor over there. It was a woman, Maria Elena Lorac. And so me and Maria Elena Lorac started communicating. I started sending, I still have some of the drawings that I sent. Some of that stuff is still floating out there. I just recently on Google found one of the magazine booklets that were published by Indigenous about women, Colombian women in Colombia, illustrated by Miguel Sagué in 1970, God knows when. Well, anyway, one of those conversations, I was talking to Maria Elena, who had identified herself as a Haitian, Taíno. And I was complaining to her, there's nothing out here about us, nothing about our spirituality. And she said, what are you talking about? There's nothing. There's, you know, I go to the museum, I go to the library, that you can't read anything. Yeah, I can go to New York to the Hay Foundation Museum of the American Indian, which at that time was up in uptown Manhattan, up in Washington Heights, and I can see all kinds of beautiful stuff, and that's very inspiring. But I want to read something. And she said, hold on, just wait, look in your mailbox. One day I went to my mailbox and I found this big manila envelope, all thick. I opened it up. Maria Elena Lorac had sat at a Xerox machine and page by page had copied Ramón Panés' relación acerca de las antigüedades de los indios. Maria Elena Lorac saved my life. okay? And I will always be thankful to her for that. She's passed over now. She's crossed over now. But her spirit is here with us, okay?
Again, I don't know if you're aware, you're sitting next to her daughter.
You're Maria Elena Larac's daughter. Well, now it's a real honor. It's a real honor. Real honor. I have a very important place in my heart for your mother. Okay? That's extraordinary. Well, oh my gosh. You know, I never actually saw her in person. She was only a voice on the phone. She's a big part in all of this. And I wonder if she really knew before she crossed over what a humongous part she played in what we have here. Maria Elena Lara. That's it. That put me in the path that I am now. I came to meet all of these wonderful people. He was one of the first ones that I met when he came up. We founded the Kane Indigenous Spiritual Circle in Pittsburgh in 1981. And by 1991, he and Bibi Naniki and a bunch of other people came from New York and they said, hey, Taínos are organizing. I said, hooray, it's about time, okay? Can I be part of it? And they said, yeah, we welcome you with open arms. And I've been working with these marvelous, and then I started meeting all these other people, all these beautiful people. Most of them I've been in touch with and in contact with ever since. And my brother, it's good to be working directly with you finally after all these years. Hang hang katu, Tainoti.